Do, 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 do. Oh, hey there everybody, I'm Joe the Disney Guy, and sorry about that, I've just had that earworm of a song stuck in my head all week. Though I guess what I should be apologizing for is getting that song stuck in your heads for the foreseeable future. Because today we're going to be taking a look at one of Disney's most popular and well-known attractions of all time. It's a Small World. The year was 1963, and Disney was already heavily involved in preparations of the 1964 World's Fair, taking place in Flushing, Queens, New York. The fair would consist of over 140 pavilions around the area, representing American states and businesses, and Disney was already hard at work for 4 of those pavilions. Disney's influence on the 1964 World's Fair is super interesting, and one of these days we're going to have to take a much more in-depth look at it, but for now, just know that Disney kind of used the World's Fair as an amusement park equivalent to their silly symphonies of the 30s, a sort of testing ground for technologies that would later work their way into Disney amusement parks. In March of 1963, only 13 months before the fair was supposed to open, the Pepsi-Cola company approached Disney, asking for help for an attraction to showcase in their pavilion. Despite the massive amount of space Pepsi-Cola had in conjunction with the United Nations International Children's Fund, or UNICEF for short, the company's board of directors struggled to decide on what they wanted to do for the pavilion, and as opening day drew nearer, they claimed to not have the time or money to actually build something to the scale that they needed, and decided, thanks in part to Joan Crawford, an actress/Pepsi board member who was friends with Walt, that Disney would be the only company capable of creating what they needed in such a short amount of time. Chairman of WED Enterprises, the research and development arm of the Disney company, and the overseer of the construction of Disneyland, Joe Fowler, originally said that there was no chance his team would have enough time to construct what Pepsi needed. But Walt disagreed and took on the project, asking his team at WED Enterprises to start working on what he called a, quote, little boat ride. So, a couple things here. First off, deadlines were clearly never a deterrent for Walt, so why start now? And in fairness, though Pepsi didn't approach Walt until March, it sounds like Walt might have gotten wind that the corporation wanted to team up with him, allowing his team to get a very slight head start. And secondly, the whole little boat ride line was clearly intentionally misleading, because if you knew Walt as well as his team knew, you knew it was going to be much bigger than just some ordinary boat ride. With WD Enterprises already working on various audio animatronics for their other World's Fair projects, the fair's overall theme of peace through understanding, and Pepsi's cooperation with UNICEF, the decision was made to create a boat ride that celebrated world peace and unity through various cultures of the world, as seen by animatronic children. The attraction would be called Children of the World, and due to the short time span allotted to create it, it took an all-hands-on-deck approach to get the attraction ready in time. Artist Mary Blair handled the art direction for the attraction, using her trademark art style to give the ride its distinct color styling. Attraction designer Bob Gurr developed the boats for the ride. Background painter Claude Coates developed the track the boats would run on. Designer Raleigh Crump designed a massive 120-foot Tower of the Four Winds to stand outside the attraction, and animator Mark Davis designed the scenes and characters for the ride. It was such a team effort that Davis's wife, Alice, designed all of the clothes that the dolls would wear. And don't worry, Walt was involved in the creative process as well, working very closely with sculptors Blaine Gibson and Greg Marinello to ensure that every doll's face was completely identical. Which, now that I say it out loud, does sound a little bit creepy. Originally, Walt wanted the dolls to be singing their country's national anthems as the ride-goer traveled through the various nations and cultures. But very quickly, that idea was nixed, as the blending of the various national anthems created an unpleasant cacophony of sound. Instead, Walt turned to his tried and true music men, Robert and Richard Sherman, to create one singular song for the attraction that could be translated into multiple different languages. Inspired by a comment from WED Enterprise employee Harriet Burns, the Sherman brothers decided to write a ballad called It's a Small World After All. And after speeding up the tempo at Walt's behest, the song was so well received that they changed the name of the attraction as well to It's a Small World. Actually, the Sherman brothers feared that their song was too simple and, believe it or not, wrote 2 other more complicated songs for the attraction. Walt decided in favor of the simpler first version though, so to let it be known that even the Sherman brothers had concerns over how often the chorus of their song played. over and over and over and over and... The ride was constructed in Burbank, California, and was then transported piece by piece to New York and reassembled. When the World's Fair opened in April of 1964, It's a Small World was the only attraction to charge admission, 60 cents for children and 95 cents for adults, with all of the proceeds being donated to UNICEF. Despite the charge, though, the whimsical ride was wildly successful, selling over 10 million tickets over the 2-year lifespan of the World's Fair, due in large part to the ride's high-capacity boats, allowing for numerous riders at a time and minimal wait time for patrons. Initially, Pepsi wasn't thrilled with the ride, concerned over the lack of Pepsi product placement on the attraction. But considering that 10 million people visited the ride, that meant that 10 million people had to visit their gift shop, which was placed at the end of the ride, an innovation at the time. So, yeah, I think Pepsi ended up getting over it. After the conclusion of the World's Fair in 1965, It's a Small World was again disassembled and shipped back to California, where it was put back together as a new attraction for Disneyland, but with some slight alterations. The ride was given an expansion, as the building it was placed in was a third larger than the one in New York, which led to both an expansion of current lands as well as the addition of the South Pacific and the North Pole to the attraction. And although the massive Tower of the Four Winds didn't make the trip west, it was replaced with a brand new facade that helped resemble landmarks from around the world, as well as a new smiling clock face that would lead into an all-new parade of wooden dolls every quarter hour, an idea of waltz to entertain ride-goers while they waited online. Also, rumor has it that the gold ornaments around the facade are real 22-karat gold, and though they may seem unnecessarily gaudy, it actually kind of makes sense. The idea was that gold paint would fade and oxidize real quickly, while real gold wouldn't. So in the long run, having real gold would actually be cheaper from a maintenance standpoint. Man, I can't wait to get to a point in my life where buying actual real gold is the cheaper option. The ride officially opened in Disneyland on May 28, 1966, and the opening celebration included Walt inviting officials from 26 countries, hundreds of international journalists, and 16 children from all across the world to pour water from rivers and oceans of their countries into the ride's flume as part of what they called Operation Water. Walt himself added water from the rivers of the United States as doves flew overhead as a gesture of world peace, the same message being conveyed on the ride. So this aspect I've always found to be really cool, as it really does pull the whole small world theme of the ride together. But if I had to pick my favorite Easter egg in the entire attraction, it would have to be in the Western Europe room, where if you look real close in the France section, you might see a doll holding a red balloon that looks an awful lot like the ride's designer, Mary Blair. It's a Small World remained largely unchanged for decades, with the first major addition to the ride coming in 1997, when the decision was made to give the ride a holiday makeover, featuring Christmas lights throughout the attraction and swapping out the classic song for a Christmas carol sung in various languages. Do you hear that? If you want to check out the ride, but you don't want to get the song stuck in your head, then California in November and December is your best chance, so go, go, go! But the biggest change to the ride was made in 2008, which saw the attraction go under major refurbishment. In addition to much needed repairs and redesigns of the boats and track, which hadn't been touched in the ride's 40-year history, 37 Disney and Pixar characters were added to the ride in their respective lands, and the New Guinea room was combined with the South Seas room, making space for the new American West room, marking the first time that the United States was actually represented on the classic ride. Now this refurbishment was pretty controversial at the time, as many people didn't really like the idea of adding in Disney characters to a ride that had, to that point, been pretty much devoid of any corporate influence. Which is kind of outstanding when you remember that the ride was initially commissioned by Pepsi. Anyway, as someone who has primarily experienced the Florida version of this ride, which doesn't have Disney characters yet, I think it's kind of a cool addition, but I can see where others might disagree. Much like the name suggests, the It's a Small World ride has spanned the globe, appearing in every Disney location worldwide except for Disney Shanghai, with slight alterations throughout. While Disney World's Small World is the only version that does not have an ornate facade outside the attraction, instead having theirs at the start of the ride inside, but without the march of the wooden dolls. Disneyland Paris has a slightly different facade and clock, and when it first opened, although the dolls were identical to the other versions, the version in Paris had a different art style from Mary Blair's, and a more ornate soundtrack composed by John Debney. After its 2015 refurbishment, however, the ride was slightly more standardized, with new entrance and exit scenes mirroring the Mary Blair style, and the soundtrack redone to sound more like the original. In Tokyo Disneyland, the facade is almost identical to the original, but with a different color scheme, and their version features the largest Japanese section of any version of Small World. And in Hong Kong Disneyland, which actually opened without Small World, their attraction is almost identical to the original in California, but with a larger Asia sequence and fiber optic lighting in their finale sequence. And throughout the various versions, the titular song was recorded in new, different languages, including Arabic, Cantonese, Mandarin, Korean, and Tagalog. Now, like I said before, my experience with this ride is primarily with the Florida version, which, although it may be the most understated version of the ride due to the facade being on the inside, it's still a classic must-ride for me every single time that I visit Disney. Though I did get to experience the classic version in California once, and I gotta say, between the history of that ride, the spectacle of the facade, and the March of the Wooden Dolls, it's probably the ultimate way to experience It's a Small World. The legacy left by It's a Small World is as big as almost any ride ever at the Disney parks. From an innovation standpoint, the high-capacity boats changed how future rides would be designed, particularly for one of Disney's other famous boat rides, Pirates of the Caribbean. And having a gift shop at a ride's exit is now standard, thanks to the success that the concept had at the World's Fair. And of course, the ride and song have been parodied all throughout media, Disney and otherwise, making it possibly the most well-known Disney attraction ever. And then of course, there's the song, that dangerously infectious song, which plays, on average, 1,200 times per day per park. And according to the Sherman Brothers, may very well be always playing at some point around the globe. In fact, Michael Eisner claims that It's a Small World is the most played song in the history of the world, and honestly, he might not even be wrong. But what's even more impressive about that is, as a way to ensure that the song would remain a gift to the world, It's a Small World is actually uncopyrighted. Or at least that's the rumor. I've actually seen some conflicting reports about this, so don't go sampling the song for your dubstep remixes just yet. So in the end, It's a Small World has gone from just a little boat ride to an international success enjoyed the world over by millions of people. Not bad for the happiest little cruise that ever sailed around the world. Well guys, that wraps up for me this week. Hope you all enjoyed, and let me know what your thoughts on It's a Small World are. Also be sure to follow me on Twitter for all updates involving myself and the channel, and to check out my Patreon to find out ways to support the channel and how to get your name on the end credits. Also be sure to subscribe to my channel, and if you like this video, be sure to check out one of these fine videos floating around my head right now. And I'll see you all real soon.